Yo, welcome back. This is the Antidote podcast. You got Paulie Dubz. This is
Hello.
Craftmatic. Yes, sir. Got my bro in here, of course, man.
Yeah, I do apologize if I sound a little stuffy or under the weather, but promise I'm not contagious through these airwaves. So we're working hard to get the message out to you. And one of the big things I noticed over the last week here is the 25th anniversary. Man, I'm getting old. 25th anniversary of Illmatic, one of
Yeah,
the classic, legendary hip hop albums of all time. If it's
my favorite.
yeah, you got it number one all
That's
time.
that's my favorite album of all time.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
I would have to agree with that. I would definitely say it's number one all time, number one all most played CD I've ever had in my life, and most listened hip hop album ever. But on top of that, it meant a lot to the culture of hip hop music. Kind of changed the game of rap music and how it's accepted by critics as well as by the masses.
Yeah, real talk. Illmatic came in at a good time of what I consider introducing the golden age of hip hop. Pretty much, hip hop was, of course, popular and popping at that time. But let's be honest, like cats wasn't rapping like that back in '93. They started to, you know what I mean.
Yeah,
'94 comes around, and a 17-year-old kid, 16, 17-year-old kid from Queensbridge, New York, decides to come and on the scene. And not only that, he was like the first artist to bring in a bunch of different producers for every track versus how
yeah.
a lot of guys during that time were using one producer and using them as a group or a duo pretty much. And that's how they introduced themselves into the game. And Nas was way ahead of the game with how he was doing it.
Yeah, and it was partially, a lot of the old cats were hating on it that he was bringing in a lot of different producers. They thought it was tainting the purity of rap at the time. And the thing about it, Nas was such a big up and coming voice that all these hot producers, like basically every hot producer in New York at the time, was pretty much begging to get on these sessions, to get on this. And if when I go down the track list here and name off the producers from Illmatic, it's like a who's who of producers, all time hip hop producers, starting with DJ Premier, produced a couple of tracks,
Yep.
New York State of Mind and Memory Lane, and LES produced Life's a Bitch. Nas also has a co-producer credit on that, as well as on the Genesis. Faith N is the producer on the Genesis. Pete Rock,
Pete Rock is on there.
The
Large
World Is
Professor.
Yours. Large Professor has two of them, Halftime and One Time for Your Mind.
Yep.
He also has It Ain't Hard to Tell. It was Large Professor.
Yes,
So,
it was.
and then you also got Q-Tip.
Yeah, which is little known to people unless you really look it up
Well,
or you knew as Q-Tip.
And Q-Tip, I mean, here in a moment, we'll get into producer conversation in terms of who we think are our favorite producers and producers to watch out for. But Q-Tip definitely gets in that underrated conversation.
Real talk for a lot of the things that he did, and of course coming with Tribe, but with everybody else that he actually produced for, from Janet Jackson to Prince to so many people. Like, yo, Q-Tip got
Busta
named.
Rhymes.
Busta Rhymes, yeah, he helped really launch that Busta Rhymes career. Pretty much, he helped him out. Of course, when leaders of the new school and all that was dealing with all them. So, yeah, most definitely. Like, and coming up in that era, that's what makes Nas, that great in that era, is that he helped shine a light on a lot of these producers. Like outside of DJ Premier got his start early, dealing with Gangstar,
Yeah.
and they dropped in 1989. He started getting his name out there early, but even Large Professor started out in the early 90s and everything, working with some younger duos and things like that back in that time. But really, Nas was like the flow, the way that he brought it literally changed the game at that time when it comes to emceeing, and you see that lyrical, gritty New York style. Like everybody had that kind of same cadence, and then here comes Nasty Nas with the types of bars that he was laying in the delivery was way ahead of his time at that time. And I really think he helped open the doors for a lot of cats who were trying to rap like that, man. And Illmatic is still one of the most powerful records, you know, from One Love to Life's a Bitch is still a personal favorite. That's actually one of my favorite songs of all time as well. Of course, with It Ain't Hard to Tell. But personally, like Life's a Bitch is always been one of my favorite songs. And he got his dad on it, so I thought that shit was dope. His dad playing the trumpet on there at the end and you know, killing it and shit. And man, Illmatic, talk about the impact you think Illmatic had for not only hip hop but just black music in general during the 90s.
I think it kind of, you know, was a big transition from kind of the old school, the 80s style Public Enemy, Tribe Called Quest, Eric B. and Rakim, kind of to more telling the stories of the streets. I mean, you can say Straight Outta Compton, NWA.
NWA.
So NWA on the West Coast. I couldn't come up with the name, man. But NWA on the West Coast, right? They were the first ones to really kind of bring the message of the streets. And Nas is really doing it in a way of telling the stories of the streets and what it was like, you know, growing up in the projects where, you know, basically you got to scramble every day and make sure you can eat that day, where, you know, you're out there hustling pretty much. And he's telling the stories in an excellent storytelling way. It's very artistic. And it's just crazy that, you know, he was 17 years old when he started writing the album Illmatic.
Right. And he was very, when we talk about storytellers in the game, we talk about some of the best storytellers in the game. And of course, like, he reminds me of Slick Rick. Slick Rick, yes, of course, being one of the greatest storytellers in the game for sure. But I think he took it to another level, the way he told the stories. And you could even hear it in pretty much in every song during that time, and him writing that out. It was like literally a story of him grinding it out, and also talking to, like, One Love is like one of the dopest stories out there that he spoke. And, you know, just putting it all together in the poetic fashion the way he did was really at the top of the game. And you kind of said it pretty much right on time, is that you know, he was helping transition the game from that 80s kind of format, and also how it was laid out, to changing the game in general, and putting in a lot of his own flair into it, and literally kind of just changed the formatting of what we saw in the 90s as far as for rappers and the styles that came to play afterwards. Like, yeah, definitely a pioneer in the game. And shout out to Nas, man. I know he's going on tour. He's actually going on tour with Illmatic I know he's going to be with, Mary J. He's going to do it with Mary J. I wonder if he's just going to do Illmatic in its entirety, which I'm sure he would, you know, being the 25th year. But it's like amazing accomplishment, because he's also done so much with that album, you know, playing it with the orchestra, you know, the playing in New York with the orchestra, Carnegie Hall. You're like, yo, that was like top level shit. And some of the best shit that I've heard, you know, putting it together that way. And I personally got to see Nas perform Illmatic in its entirety. Shit. With DJ Premier and Pete Rock battling before he actually did Illmatic.
Damn.
Yeah, that was probably the most lit shit I've ever seen in my life. I saw that at South by Southwest. It was one of the dopest experiences ever, watching my favorite MC do his whole album, and I'm sitting there spinning it word for word. And then you got Pete Rock and DJ Premier spinning tracks and going at each other, kind of like a battle almost, and then getting into Nas's set. Like, it was wild. You don't get to see shit to that amplitude. There's very few in all of the music who can do something like that and make it transcend to where people of every race pretty much could get into it, especially if you love hip hop.
Yeah, most definitely. And also you have to understand, like, in terms of pop music, hip hop's first kind of breaking into the mainstream at this time in the early 90s. This is the time of MC Hammer and Vanilla Ice. So they're the first two guys that really charted really high with hip hop or rap. I mean, if you consider that garbage hip hop or rap anyway. It was
Pop.
pop music is what it
Yeah,
was,
it's pop, bro.
but it got everybody, it got the general public more open and aware to it as opposed to, in the 80s and the Tipper Gore and Two Live Crew and
Yeah,
NWA
Too Live. That's what I was
scandals
gonna
and
say.
all
Too
that
Live
stuff
and
there.
shit.
Um, but I
He
don't know.
almost fucked it up for us all.
Nas kind of just on this album, he kind of brought together all types of black art together into
Yeah,
one because it's got so it's, all of the beats are jazz based,
right.
right? So it's jazzy hip hop, and then he brings kind of the street poet edge to it, like Jill Scott Heron, and then it's hip hop, so all the pioneers before him, and this album I think forever makes Nas king of New York. I mean, when you think of New York music, you probably think of Frank Sinatra and Nas.
Yeah, and there's gonna be people who disagree. They're gonna have Jay-Z up there. I feel that too. But Illmatic came first, and both. Don't get me wrong, both projects were really good. Reasonable Doubt was really great. That's a great album as well. Has some classic shit, also with some DJ Premier production on that. But Nas kind of set that standard because he started it in '94, and Reasonable Doubt didn't come until late '95. Basically, '96 is when it took off. So Illmatic had already been bubbling in the city for that 2 years pretty much before.
Yeah, and there was hype behind Illmatic for like a year before that, before it even dropped.
Oh yeah, for sure. Because everybody was fucking with him in the streets because he was a street boy. Everybody knew who Nas was, and they knew that he was putting together some rhymes. And of course, working with Cormega and everybody that he grew up with, AZ, they all could flow. And just him getting that first step into it really launched what I feel like was that golden era of hip hop for sure. And of course, there was some others in there beforehand who really started to set that bar too. Don't get me wrong. Of course, we're talking like Tribe and De La, but then you got Illmatic. Like Illmatic is still up there, and as far as hip hop, you got it. Everybody I talk to in hip hop at least has it. Better be in your top five, and if it's not, that means you just don't know shit about hip hop. But almost most people, I would say 90% of people I know, they would have Illmatic as the best hip hop album of all time, and that still remains to be true in my eyes. Some people disagree, but hey, that's on you. I'm going with the majority as well. But also, it was a big time for me when growing up. I just clicked with it personally, and that's what people have to find with their music is how does it click with you personally. And it honestly brings me back to some of the greatest moments of my childhood, chilling with my oldest brother and him just getting back from Job Corps. And he was just had learned, and I had posted this on Facebook because this is kind of a cool little story or whatever, is like Nas is definitely big into the Asiatic knowledge of self movement during that time. You hear a lot of it during there, talking about knowledge of self. What up, son? What up, dog? What up, God? Stuff like that. My brothers and them, my cousins all grew up doing all that. So the first real joint that I got into hip hop wise was Illmatic. That was like the first joint that I ever got introduced to for hip hop. And outside of that, with Wu-Tang and the 36 Chambers, that was the next one right after that. But literally, Illmatic was what set the bar for me to love hip hop. And that's why I fell in love with hip hop, was listening to Life's a Bitch. So me personally, that has a connection to that story. So I always have that in my heart, is like, okay, this is the shit. And I listened to it for such a long time in my childhood, and even growing up still, that it's like, damn, it really had that kind of impact. And a lot of cats really sleep on it for real. But 25 years later, man, it's still one of the greatest albums of all time in general, and definitely still holds true for me as the greatest hip hop album of all time. And we've gotten some new classics since then, and all that kind of stuff. And we had, of course, the Jay-Z's and everybody else.
Shay,
after
you
that.
had just a couple months later in 1994. I'm sure we'll be talking about this when it comes up. 25th anniversary coming up of Ready to Die.
Yeah, Ready to Die. Yeah, Biggie. Yeah,
Also
right
a
around the same
classic
time.
album.
Also a classic. I don't know if I have it as high. I think, of course, Life After Death was better to me. A lot of people, you can go back and forth. I think Biggie's at his rawest there, but his best songwriting was in, at least in my opinion, to
Yeah.
into life after death. But yeah, definitely talking about some of the greatest albums and things like that. We'll definitely have some more conversations around greatest albums of all time coming up, because we're approaching the end of the 2010 era pretty much.
Yep.
And we'll be at 2020 next year. So we're going to talk about definitely the top albums of the decade, but then kind of compare those in this decade, because I think we're re-entering a new golden era, at least from my standpoint. I think this is the best time in music. So to kind of blend all of that together, we wanted to even introduce or talk more about the producing side of it, man, the production.
The unsung heroes.
The most unsung and underpaid people of all the game in most fashions is the producer and the guys who make it sound the way it is. Like, yeah, the dude's got flow, but the beats is what make you ride to it and want you to play it again. And producer wise, man, let's talk about our Mount Rushmores, man. Go ahead, Paulie. What is your top 5 favorite producers of all time?
Top 5 favorite producers of all time. All right, so can't have the conversation without talking about Jay Dilla. I'd have to put him at number 1 just because of influence and just beautiful body of work. You know, just so inspirational to so many different people, and just really changed the game of sampling and looping and things like that. Would you have Jay Dilla as your number 1 spot?
I do have Jay Dilla as my number 1. He's the most influential producer for me, definitely getting into, looking at The Shining and Donuts and everything else that he did. He helped embody what to me hip hop was, and he inspired some of the next wave and generation, literally a generation of producers after him. And that's the biggest impact that you can have. A lot of people somewhat emulate the person that they look up to the most. And I think pretty much everything that you hear today is a remix of some Dilla shit, especially on the hip hop side of it. So yeah, definitely.
Yeah, you can hear those offbeat Dilla drums like on so many hip hop releases that it's crazy.
Right.
Gonna assume that most people do know who Jay Dilla is. Those of you that don't, stop listening to us right now and just look up Jay Dilla and listen to his music for the rest of the day. But he's worked with
for real.
he worked with Tribe Called Quest, De La Soul, The Pharcyde, The Roots, Common, Erykah Badu, Busta Rhymes, Madlib, and Common the Light. That's probably my favorite Jay Dilla beat.
Yeah, that's definitely one of my favorite songs. Definitely top 3 Jay Dilla beats of all time. It's one of my favorites as well. And a lot of people love The Pharcyde, right? And it's like they don't even know that Dilla pretty much produced that whole album.
He did Lab Cab in California. He made the entire album. That was right when he moved to LA. I don't remember the whole story about it, but he was being offered like a shit ton of money to go to New York. And he said, "No, I'm going to go work with these underground cats in LA called The Pharcyde." And they put out Lab Cab in California. It's a classic album as well.
Classic. Definitely a classic album. Top 50 albums of all time. For hip hop, you got to put The Pharcyde in there. And definitely just the whole, Passing Me By, everything else that's on there.
Running.
I mean, you're talking about some of the best production and one of the best hip hop groups of all time, being all produced by Jay Dilla is nuts. I still can't wrap my mind around that sometimes.
Right. Like Water for Chocolate, Common's album.
Yep.
Also a classic, entirely produced by Jay Dilla.
I know it had some help in there, with some of the sounds and stuff, but definitely Jay Dilla had the majority of that touch on there. Like Water for Chocolate, obviously, is another classic. It's common sense, man. It's common. Like
he did the whole Tribe album, right?
He didn't do the whole album, but he did a lot of the production on the Tribe album as well. And that was
Is it People's Instinctive Travels?
Yes. I was gonna say Midnight, but Midnight was before that. So yeah. And even then, I think he had a few features on Midnight Marauders too, where he was kind of working with some stuff on there too. And that's kind of where he
worked hand in hand with Q-Tip a lot and the Soulquarians along with that.
Yeah, as well as the Uma the group the Uma, which was like another underground collective, um, which was Q-Tip, Jay Dilla, and I forgot who else was in the Uma as well. But so they had the Soulquarians and then the Uma, and these are all collectives that all kind of work together. You know, Mos Def was in there for sure because he was doing a bunch of rap stuff with them. Um, and then Black Star, you know, Talib, of course, Talib Kweli. So they're just man, he had a lot of influence on that underside of just the production, like, man, and again, his influence was so heavy.
Okay, so the Umma was Q-Tip, Ali Shaheed Muhammad, and Jay Dilla, and they also had Raphael Sadiq and D'Angelo occasionally work with the Umma. The Umma produced The Love Movement by Tribe Called Quest.
Yeah, man.
So he did the whole album with Q-Tip and Ali Shaheed Muhammad on that one.
And Ali Shaheed Muhammad is so slept on because he's been around for a long time too, and he's still doing stuff out there. Matter of fact, he did a lot of work recently with Ghostface on doing some of Luke Cage and some of that stuff. So I mean, there's been a lot of people that have been influenced. And again, you hear the names D'Angelo, Q-Tip. These are heavy hitters in the game and some of the best. And they all had a hand in it, man. And Dilla had a lot of hands in it. And he, like you said before, he kind of transcended the game when it came to the sampling and the off kiltered beat match of how he put his snares and things in there. Mm-hmm. It was really unmatched and really unheard of, and a lot of cats could never even try to manipulate that, especially at that time. Really, nobody was fucking with Jay Dilla at all. So definitely Jay Dilla's got to be number one in my book.
Yeah, and we haven't even brought up Slum Village, I don't think, in this whole conversation.
No, we didn't even talk Slumville, and they did all of Slumville. He did all of Slumville.
Yeah, he's 1/3 of Slum Village. He did all the production on that, and as well as 1/3 of the rapping on it. And Jay Dilla, rest in peace, Jay Dilla forever. Life tragically cut short at like age 32. So, but we both agree he's the GOAT.
Yeah, for sure.
So let's see here. Top 5. So we got to keep going. Man, I got to mention Kanye West. I got to have him in my top 5. I won't say he's number 2, but I got to put him in my top 5.
Okay. I respect that.
So the reason I would have to have him in there is I'm a sucker for that jazzy soul production. So when he first came on the scene, he, was probably the GOAT at that kind of, sampling voices and making them part of the beat. He kind of changed the whole game with that. As an artist, he's always evolving. He never really gets stuck in one sound. You know what I mean? Like every album's completely different. He's always pushing the envelope and always pushing the envelope to where this cat drops an auto-tune album, Heartbreaks and 808s, and immediately, like, I thought it was garbage. I didn't want to listen to it.
You and like everybody else, bro.
Yeah, I'm like, come on, what the hell is this? But if you look at it in retrospect, if you look at it at that album right now,
if you listen to that album right now, yes,
and compare that album to what you hear on Top 40 radio or urban radio stations, like hip hop stations and stuff like that, damn, that's all from 808s and Heartbreaks.
Real shit.
Like everything, like Drake's whole career is influenced by that album. Like,
for real.
You know what I mean? Post Malone's whole career based off of that album. Any of these, people, like that album really changed the game, and it's like his worst piece of work.
Right. Well, I mean, I don't know. You said it right. Retrospectively, when you got to look at it and listen again, I actually fucked with it right away. A lot of people didn't, and they thought I was crazy. I actually liked it a lot because Welcome to Heartbreak and So Amazing were like some of my favorite tracks, bro. I love So Amazing, and they, like you said, that auto-tune, but that hard hitting, like, it was just crazy. I was like, yo, this beat pattern is stupid. How can't you like this right now? Like, it sounds like you're in the African jungle running through that bitch.
So that's crazy. He goes from the soul beats to that. And then from there, he goes to like overproduced, like top of the line, I mean, massive arena kind of sound albums.
Right.
Watch the Throne and My Black Dark Twisted Fantasy.
Yeah.
After completely switching from that, and then to follow up those albums, he comes up with Yeezus, which I still don't think people are ready for what that album was.
Yeah, I wasn't a fan of Yeezus, and I'm still not. It's still gonna probably take me a while for to get to it. But like songs like Black Skinhead and New Slaves
Hmm.
and shit like that, those were some crazy ass tracks, and I love the production on them. Like New Slaves is one of my favorite joints of recent from Kanye in the newer era for sure. Um, so I can, man, I'm not even mad at you for where you have Kanye. And you said you don't know if he's number two. So let me ask you this: basically, from 2 to 5, it could be a toss up. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, from 2 to 5, it could probably be a toss up.
Okay.
So, and I'm
Definitely Kanye
including
I'd have in there too.
influence in the game on there, as well as a big portion. For the same reason I have Kanye in there, I'd have to have Dr. Dre in there as well,
Okay.
just for influence on the game. Um, the Chronic, another game changing album. Was that from 1994 as well?
No, that was
92?
92, I think. Yeah, I
Yeah.
believe it was
Okay.
92. It was like late 92 and really popped off in 93.
Okay. So the Chronic, um, introducing Snoop Dogg to the world, just alone on that, and then NWA, everything before that, bringing Ice Cube and Eazy-E on his production, and Dr. Dre just thought will have to be there just as a massive name of all time. Like he would have to be on the Mount Rushmore of rap producers, my
Yeah.
opinion.
Okay.
Um, and then I'd have to have DJ Premier on there because I'm a sucker for Gangstar. Gangstar are probably like some of my favorite shit ever.
Yeah. Real talk.
So
Rest in peace, Guru.
yeah, rest in peace, Guru. That just passed on the anniversary of his passing too.
Yep.
So I don't know.
And actually, DJ Premier posted on his IG, I think actually yesterday or the day before, their first album, it just hit its 30 something year because it came out in
Oh
I
yeah, it
think
was.
it's
I think
30. I think it's 30 years. I think because it was 89 when it came out.
yeah.
So I think it's actually 30 years this year since their first album came out as Gangstar. So that's pretty
Yeah.
dope.
Fuck yeah, man. So yeah, I would definitely have to have DJ Premier on there. Some classic beats, just a classic sound. That a timeless sound. Like DJ Premier beats would still be hot. 20 years from now.
Right.
And then would have to have Pete Rock on there as well.
Yep.
So a lot of East Coast influence. A good thing, I guess, I put Dre on there. And most importantly, I just didn't want motherfuckers to think that I forgot about Dre. So,
I mean, at
but
least you did because definitely ours is actually pretty similar. So I think that's pretty dope. I think ours is actually pretty similar. I kind of at my number 5, I just have like a toss up of who I could put there too. So I'm
okay,
gonna kind of ramble through mine as well. So definitely we talked about Dilla at 1. I actually have Pete Rock in my number 2, and the reason why I have Pete Rock in my number 2 is his influence to me doing Nas was very big to me, and I also was a big fan of Pete Rock and CL Smooth.
oh
So
yeah, both those albums fire.
both of those albums were fire. And Reminisce over you is probably one of my favorite tracks of all time as well, as far as a hip hop joint. Pete Rock definitely had just the touch of the music, and even now he's still going and he's still dope as shit. Like the Peach Instrumentals series that he's been doing that for like 20 years almost now, and they're still so good, and I actually wait for him all the time. And he just dropped that joint recently, or is getting ready to, and it's like, he's just a monster, man. And he still uses all his old equipment. He's using the SP 1200, he's still using the MPC 1000 and the MPC 2000. Like, he still hasn't really switched up from it, and then he still just adds and builds on top of it. You don't see too many guys doing that who's using that old analog sound and can still make it sound the way they do now.
And one of my favorite Pete Rock beats is The Joy on Watch the Throne.
Yes.
Kanye and Jay-Z.
Yes.
The Joy, just the way he flipped that Curtis Mayfield. It's
right.
Just so dirty, like very, very unique way to flip it and turn it into that beat. It's an awesome song if you haven't ever heard it.
Yeah, if you've never heard that track, I mean, you're slipping already as it is. But I mean, just everything that he's done, working with the main ingredient from back in '94. I love the main ingredient too. My
Right.
brother was a big fan of them. Um, Mecca and the Soul Brother. I remember hearing about them, way back too. So I mean, and he's worked with everybody too. I mean, again, since '89, he actually produced and co-produced a lot with Heavy D, back in the late '80s, and Brand Nubian and Kid and Play. I mean, the list goes on. Um, he definitely did a lot of shit with a lot of cats, and I really respect him. He's always been a beast, and yeah, he's just always going to be kind of there in that light for me. And then number three for me, it actually was kind of an easy choice, but it took me a minute. Was Timbaland. Um,
Okay.
I
Great
really
choice.
respect the shit out of Timbaland coming from VA. Timbaland to me remixed a lot of that '90s sound, and he had his own sound. Like it was, you knew when it's a Timbaland beat. Like you kind of know when it's somebody's beat. You knew it was a
Yeah.
Timbaland beat by the sound of his drums. He had the only drums that he had was his sound. It was his drums. You knew it was his. Those weird noises. Like think about all the Aaliyah music and everything that he helped produce during Aaliyah's big coming up and blowing up in the '90s, into the early 2000s. Like her whole sound, the whole Missy sound, Timbaland and Magoo.
Ooh,
Uh,
Missy Elliott, another underrated producer.
yeah, Missy's in there, and definitely Timbaland was in there showing her everything, and that's how she kind of got her taste of everything. Is Timbaland said, "Well, damn, you can produce your own shit," and he taught her how to do it. And Timbaland, of course, just again transcended a lot of shit to me too. He changed a lot of things, and I think he helped push the barriers for cats because he was working with R&B cats that people be scared to really work with or couldn't work with. He was working with them, the Justin Timberlakes, the NSYNCs, Britney Spears, Christina Aguilera. Like he's worked with all of those big names that you heard in that timeline. He worked with them.
Bro,
Like
he worked with
people were
Bubba
going.
Sparks too.
He worked with Barbara Sparks, I mean, literally all these one hit wonders, not only one hit wonders, but just big groups of people, especially that boy band and pop girl era. He destroyed that. Like that was all him. Like there was a lot of shit that he was funneling around at that time, and you got to respect Timbaland for his level, man. His level. Tweet was like one of those underrated R&B artists. I love Tweet, and he kind of found and discovered that, and he's been doing it for a long time, man. He's been doing it for a long time. I mean, some of Jay-Z's biggest hits, think of Dirt Off Your Shoulder, like
Right.
2000s, all that kind of shit. He was doing all of that. Basically anything that came on the Blueprint 2 was produced by two people, and it was either Timbaland or Pharrell. And that's actually who I have at number 4 is Pharrell.
Number four, Pharrell. All right.
I gotta have Pharrell up there. Me and you were talking about it, and I really had to go back and think about how much I think I actually love Pharrell's production because he's been doing it for so long, and there was a lot of songs that a lot of cats weren't really up on game about, that he did, or he had the influence of. And Pharrell's been around a long, long time too. Like he's been around since the '90s too, and we're talking like almost as far back as Teddy Riley type days and shit like that.
He was on Rump Shaker, right?
Yeah, he
Pharrell
helped
has a
co-produce.
credit
Yeah, he
on
has a
Rump
credit on it.
Shaker.
Yep. And it's like, damn, you even touched that? Like, see, he
Rex and
helped.
Effects.
Yeah, Rex and Effects. I mean, he helped build that sound. Actually, that New Jack Swing. He helped Teddy Riley with building New Jack Swing, and all those kinds of things. Like he got a lot of different shit. And we're talking about Pharrell, man. This is Pharrell Williams. Um,
Yeah.
definitely the
A
Star
goat.
Trek, Neptune's label and everything that they stand for. I mean, come on, they pretty much transcended a lot of shit too. You're talking about changing and transcending. Pharrell did a lot of that as well. You hear a lot of newer artists give a lot of respect to Pharrell because of the way that he pushed sounds from everything, man. And he had all those like weird twangs too, and you knew it was a Pharrell beat too. Like as soon as you heard the track, you knew it was Pharrell
Yeah. Right.
because
You
you
know
knew it by his
his
kind
drum.
of drums. Yeah,
Yep.
his kind of drums, his snaring, his breakdowns were different. I Just Want to Love You from Jay-Z is always going to be one of my favorite Pharrell joints of all time, just because that track was always wild. It's still a club banger. You can drop that today, and the shit's gonna still go crazy. that kind of level, man. Like he literally touched so much shit.
Yeah, I mean, he worked with like Gwen Stefani. Um, he's worked with everybody.
Yeah, he's worked with literally everybody. Like there pretty much isn't anybody that he hasn't dealt with, and he's produced some of the biggest hits of all time. You know, when it comes to some of the music that he has dealt with, he's produced for Fall Out Boy. I mean, who would think that Pharrell is producing for Fall Out Boy? You know, he's done every hip hop artist has gone to him. He
Or
did
like,
a whole original motion picture soundtrack with doing Despicable Me. Like,
yeah, Happy, one of the biggest songs of all time.
yeah, for
Of the
sure.
last 10 years, for
For
sure.
sure, definitely. Oh, not
Probably.
even just that one. Robin Thicke, even though he stole it,
From
I
Marvin.
can say that he did try to do something. It did sound very similar to that track, but I mean, still, when do you not hear blurred lines most of the time at any party with white people,
Mhm.
black people, whatever? You know, he did he produced a whole Gloria Estefan album. I didn't even know that shit.
Damn,
I
nobody
don't.
knew that. I don't
Gloria
think.
Estefan is literally a OG in that game, and he produced a whole album. I'm seeing 9 tracks here that he worked and he co-produced it with her husband Emilio Estefan, and that's pretty much it. You know, that's him on top of it, but he's produced for Frank Ocean, Usher, anybody, man. Like there's just you go across the board. He's produced for them. He's made songs with them. Even Kendrick Lamar
Bro,
up to Kendrick, anybody, you know?
Ariana Grande Sweetener is like 80% Pharrell beats.
Yeah. And you see how crazy that album went and sold and did and everything that he's accomplished with that. Like, man, he just has a proven track record, and all the way back to like nothing is one of my favorite beats too. Nothing, what you trying to do, nigga? Hey, I love that track. Story, nothing is still like one of the hardest tracks ever. Like that's the type of shit I'm talking about. He could almost even move up the list because Pharrell really got that.
Yeah.
He,
Also seems like the coolest dude in the world, right?
oh yeah, for sure, definitely. He seems down
nobody
to
said
earth.
nobody said nothing bad about P.
For real, Skateboard P is the realest, and he probably hasn't aged a day. I think he's an alien because he looks the same. Like
In
I've never seen a dude who's never like aged any.
20
Um,
years.
yeah, like real talk, bro. Like he looks like the same dude.
How
Like I'm
old do you
like
think that
shit.
dude is?
Yeah, everybody thinks he's. How old do you think he? I think he's closer to. He's got to be almost 50 if he's working with Teddy Riley.
Yeah,
He's
he's
got to be. Almost,
46.
yeah, see, look at that. He's got
46.
to be almost
He
50
looks younger than both of us.
for real.
Motherfucker.
And he's probably done way more drugs than we have. So it's like, so how do you keep that? How do you keep that going? But Pharrell, yeah, I mean, it's Pharrell, like man, definitely. And then
Yeah.
at 5, I kind of have a lot of a toss up because there are so many influential producers. When you said Kanye, Kanye was also in that number. So I basically call it 5 through 9. They're all tied at 5th. And so they're all 5 until you get to the last person or whatever. But I got Premier, DJ Premier, of course. DJ Premier, it's DJ Premier. Like, come on, man.
Yeah.
He helped embody what is hip hop today. Not only is he one of the best producers, he's one of the coldest DJs ever, and it's just DJ Premier. Then you got The Alchemist. The Alchemist to me is just so dope. Alchemist is just so dope. All the work that he did with Mobb Deep and all that stuff back in the day, like Helter Skelter and so many, you know, working with the Wu and everything that Alchemist has done from years and years and years. Is so slept on, but he's definitely up there for me because it's The Alchemist, man, and he's still doing it. He's still killing it. And I remember even hearing him rapping and shit, and I just would laugh and be like, "Yo, who's this goofy ass white dude?" When I was a kid, and I'm like, "Oh, but he produced that." And I'm like, "Oh shit, what?" Like, come on, man! Like this dude's rapping. He's a corny little looking white dude, but the dude he had some bars, but he's an even way better producer. And still doing it to this day, producing shit. That Fetty recently with Freddie Gibbs and Currency is just crazy, and all the projects that Currency has with The Alchemist, like Alchemist you can definitely tell like that dude just has his shit together. Like, yo, he's
Action Bronson, right? Works with him a lot.
yeah. Action Bronson, Ghostface has done a lot of work with Alchemist. Like just his bodies of works as well. Like you can't sleep on Alchemist at all.
And he drops beat tapes like every month.
Yeah, he's still doing it, and that's what I love about him too. Is that he's still doing it. He's still putting all of this shit out and doing it at a great rate, and still doing it really well. Like it's not terrible. You know how some people have that plateau, you know, where they kind of suck. I still have yet to find that with the Alchemist. Like I don't know if that'll ever come for him, because he's just that good. Like he's worked with everybody, man. Evidence, Rock Marciano, of course, like I just said, Mobb Deep, rest in peace, Prodigy. You know, he's worked with Swizz, Jay-Z, Kanye, Lil Wayne, Drake. I mean, literally everybody. Future. He's done some shit. He had some features with Jay Dilla where he helped with Jay Dilla shit. Like literally, these guys are just stars, and he's worked with them all. So you got to give him some credit there, and you got to put him up there. And a lot of people actually have Alchemist in their top 10 as well. So I fucks with it.
Totally agree.
Large Professor to me is up there as well. Large Professor did a lot of work in his early heyday as well, and you know, working with Big L. Big L is one of my favorite MCs that was cut too short, and definitely Large Professor, OG in the game. Mad respect to him and his works, and he kind of came in with that same timeline as the DJ Premiers and everybody like that. So mad respect to him. I know there's a lot of East Coast. Kanye is mixed in there, and then I also have Manny Fresh.
That's a great one too, man.
That's my southern one. That's my southern one because I got a rep for the South, and I grew up on a lot of South music. There was a lot of different producers back in the day that I think were slept on, like DJ Paul from 3 6 Mafia. I love 3 6 Mafia.
Yeah, did you see DJ Paul sued Travis Scott?
Yeah, I saw that today for $20 million, bro. I was like, you ain't getting that shit.
Travis Scott ain't make $20 million off that album, bro.
Exactly. He didn't even make $20 million off the album and that song, let alone to sue him.
And so that was like one of the top selling albums last year. I bet you he didn't make 20 mil off that album.
No, I guarantee you he didn't, because everything was streamed. And then now you're trying to hit him over the head like Juice WRLD. DJ Paul thinks he's U2 or something.
He thinks he's Marvin Gaye.
Yeah, right.
Suing Pharrell.
To go that high. So yeah. So and then Manny Fresh, of course, like Manny Fresh literally put the South on the map and helped bring up the Cash Money army.
That Cash Money sound.
That real Cash Money sound, man. I mean, look at it. Juvie, Wayne, Baby, Big Timers, all of it, bro. Like that whole section and pocket of music was very pivotal to the game. A lot of people say that they kind of fucked up the game. I've heard some of those, oh man, the South fucked up the rap game. Nah, there was a lot of capping back in the day too, way before niggas thought that the South was killing the rap game. But when you're talking like production wise, Manny Fresh was definitely on that next level, doing that other shit, you know, and bringing that NOLA sound to the mainstream. And I love it because he basically helped build Cash Money. Like they don't give him enough credit. And he's the reason why he's pretty much half of the reason why Cash Money is what it was and what it is today. So
and just that, you know, definitely influenced the entire like trap sound.
Yeah, no doubt.
Atlanta.
Yeah, definitely taking the whole NOLA sound, and everybody else then started coming in the trap. So kind of flipping it and slowing it down a little bit more. But you know, then of course they had the Texas producers and stuff like that. But even then, and then, you know, DJ Premier being from Houston, he produced a lot for Scarface and shit like that. But yeah, I mean, that's real shit. I mean, to me, that's like literally that fifth place is kind of a toss up. I got them all in there.
Yeah.
I got 10 there that I named, and pretty much anybody can fit into that 5 in that group, however which way I kind of feel on a certain day. Any of them could be at number 5, but definitely 1 through 4 is kind of locked in for me.
I feel you, man. Like I said, it's a tough decision to make, especially when you got to sit down and some of these guys have tremendous bodies of work, like Timbaland or Pharrell. You know,
it was tough actually putting that shit together when we were trying to talk about it, because I also had respect for Dr. Dre and everything that they did too. West Coast didn't come as prevalent into my life until later, but you got to respect what the Chronic did in the Chronic 2000. Of course, I mean,
Just the whole
everybody knows.
G-Funk sound.
Yeah, the whole G-Funk sound. And well, and even then in that same function, I would put Warren G as a better producer than Dr.
DJ
Dre
Clue.
to be DJ Quick. Yeah, DJ Quick. And definitely Warren G to me were better producers, like overall producers, than Dr. Dre. I think Dr. Dre had a lot of help when it came to some of that shit. He definitely knew how to make some of those rides, but Warren G knew how to make that true G-Funk when they talking like Regulate and all that. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot that goes into it. I definitely want to hear some of our fans or listeners opinions on who they got in their top 5, because everybody's differs. But I think ours is kind of we kind of got some of the same ones, because we got some of the same influences when it comes to the music and how it impacted our lives. So it definitely makes sense.